Hello, everyone. I'm very excited to have you guys here. I'm Marcia Klingensmith. I'm the CEO of FinTech Consulting, and welcome to another episode of Instant Payments Decoded. So I'm the instant payments maven, and I have a passion around payments. And my goal with these series of webcasts is to help make instant payments and payments modernization accessible to financial institutions and to fintechs. And so, as part of this series, I invite different guests that have expertise in these different areas that can showcase different aspects of instant payments. And so today we're diving deep into how financial institutions can leverage instant payments not only for operational efficiency, but also as a catalyst for product innovation and revenue generation. Because I know building that business case for investing that resource and that time and floating instant payments to the top of the stack, justifying that can be kind of hard. But the more we think about the opportunities for your business, the easier it gets to cost justify. So we'll be exploring how instant payments can also be the foundation for your modernization strategy. So one of the things that I've been finding as I talk to financial institutions is that they're having a hard time cost justifying instant payments as just a standalone body of work. But if you think about it in terms of your larger payments modernization strategy, like getting off of those legacy systems, getting onto more cloud-based, nimble architecture, that bigger picture could be an easier cost justification than just instant payments by itself. And so today our special guest is Mark Majeske. He's the SVP of Faster Payments at Alacriti, and he's a leading provider. They're a leading provider of third-party payment solutions, a third-party payment solution provider to help financial institutions get connected to the network. And so he's going to have a lot of really fun and interesting things to say. So, Mark, I'm just going to let you introduce yourself. So tell us a little bit about yourself and your role at Alacriti and your other experience.
Thank you, Marcia. Glad to be here and welcome everyone. As SVP of Faster Payments at Alacriti, I lead the overall corporate faster payments strategy and product development for our payments hub. Our payments hub is a cloud-based system that includes Wire, ACH, RTP, FedNow, and Visa Direct. I hope I got all those. From a career perspective, I started my career in banking. Started with JPMC in New York, and spent a lot of time in digital payments. Worked for JPMC, Citi, SunTrust in Atlanta, and also TD both in Canada and the US. After that point, I went and joined the clearinghouse, where I was part of the team that helped develop the RTP network, develop and launch it, and later went to FIS, where I was managing a number of products in the faster payments realm, but also including bill pay. Today, currently at Alacriti, we're a 20-year-old firm, a fintech servicing and partnering, I should say, with FIs.
I see a whole bunch of us gathered here, and I just want to let you know, like, as we're going through, you have the opportunity to do like raise your hand, and I can see if I can get you, like, if you have questions. We want this to be interactive, and I'm going to do a poll in just a minute. But if you guys have questions for Mark or myself, do your hand raise. I can see if I can get you off a speaker and cameras. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And then also we have a Q&A section, so you can just kind of pop your questions in the Q&A area, and so we'll answer them the best we can. So our first poll here is, like, what are your biggest hurdles to instant payments adoption? And if you may get a pop on your screen. If you don't see a pop on your screen, it might be in the chat. So go and look for that poll. We have things of, maybe you don't have the compelling use case, or the difficulty of building a business case, or concerns about fraud and security. So go ahead and kind of share your perspectives there. And while you guys are doing that, I want to uh, talk about Alacriti a little bit to help our audience understand a little bit. Like Alacriti, you did give us a little bit of an introduction, but what exactly is Alacriti? How do you guys, who's your target market, and how are you guys helping financial institutions today?
Sure. Part of it, and so the question is, who do we service? We pretty much service any FI. I would say that, maybe a couple of years ago we were just focusing on small to medium size, but we've kind of expanded our efforts, and so we handle FIs of any size at this point. We do that in two areas. So the first part of our business is called unified money movement, and that really is under the guise of loan payments. So we work with banks, and we do external transfers for them, um, digital disbursements, and new account payments. So as you're opening a new account, we'll actually collect that first deposit. The second piece of our business is the payments hub that I may have mentioned, and that was really around, it's a cloud native hub, enabling you to add different rails as you move forward and grow. And again, that was Wire, ACH, RTP, FedNow, and Visa Direct. I call it a grow as you go model because, quite frankly, it's not a huge effort to implement it. And if you just wanted, I'll just use an example, if you just want RTP and then you want to grow out to FedNow or anything else later, it's very easy to do. To add those. So it's great for organizations that are growing, that want to start with one rail and add additional rails.
And this is kind of where I see the whole payments journey beginning, because I think what happens when financial institutions connect to your hub or a hub, um, because because all the financial institutions aren't enabled for instant payments, that usually you don't just add instant payments, you have to add your other payment mechanisms to that so that that transaction can go through. And now you start getting this consolidated view of all your payments in one place. So instead of having to go to separate systems to see your different payment types, it's just one view. And I would love to hear your view, like what are all the different things that they're seeing when they're looking at that? Like, is this the ability to compare the costs between the channels? Can you use this as kind of like a fraud view, like consortium across that? And because I think like what happens when financial institutions can see all this in one place, they see the power of like migrating to the hub and migrating to the cloud and getting real-time access to data and this real-time access to payments. So maybe you could elaborate a little bit more
I can give you a
there.
perspective on a payments hub. And the one thing I want to say is, and I've been in banking for a while, and there used to be a time when you mentioned the word hub, and people would start to kind of shudder a little bit. And the reason is, what a hub meant was that it was going to be on-prem, and it was going to cost you about $1 million, and it would take a year to implement. But that's changed. And so today's more modern hubs, like the one that we're offering in the cloud, um, literally will take you about 8 to 10 weeks to implement, and it creates that experience that Marcia is talking about in terms of, by using our portal, where you can, if you're utilizing a multitude of rails, you have all that data in front of you in terms of reporting. You can do custom reports. You can check daily activity. You can check on your fraud scores for various transactions. So it really does help you in terms of efficiency, particularly if you're in a company that has multiple lines of business. That payments hub, all the transactions would be consolidated, the enterprise transactions consolidated in one place. It's very easy to report. I'm a big data geek. I started my banking career in business intelligence, so I use it in everything I do. And the amount of data you get from a payments hub and the efficiencies is great. Also, you get into situations where, let's say your customer wants to send you a batch file, but they want you to filter it. meaning that I'm going to send you a master batch file, and within it there are rules where some of the transactions would be ACH, some of them would be RTP, FedNow, Visa Direct, whatever that may be. And so it really enables the financial institutions to be very, very flexible in offering that to their customers, right? So it really does build that value.
Yeah, no, I think it's pretty exciting. I was just going to look at the polls. If you guys didn't answer the poll, I think you can keep answering. So if there's questions that you didn't respond. So we see like compelling use cases, is one of the big things that our people are interested in. And so we're definitely going to be talking about that. There's some concerns about fraud and security. We always hear concerns about fraud and security, and then lack of internal buy-in. So I don't know, Mark, if you have any like immediate thoughts on just some of those comments there.
Well, I think look, every one of them is valid, right? So when you're looking at and if you don't mind, if you could list the first three.
Yeah. Well, so we have lack of compelling use cases, concerns
Okay.
about
Yeah.
fraud and security, and lack of internal buy-in from management. But it's interesting because they didn't pick ROI, building the business case, or operational challenges like integration or concerns about regulation. So it's more about getting that buy-in, addressing those fraud and security concerns, and then how did you use the tech? So
I think
so we'll go off like, so if we talk a little bit about maybe some of those use cases, and then we can come back and talk a bit about the tech and how you integrate. So we'll just swap the order a little bit there.
Sure. I think a lot of people are asking, well, what's 2025 going to bring, right? And so I'm going to cover that a bit, because when you look at the two networks, you're starting to get momentum in terms of volume growth. Obviously, more so on RTP right now. It's 8 years old, or going on 8 years old. I don't know when the birthday is, but also for FedNow, right? It's been out a shorter period of time, so it's starting to grow banks. Look, each one of those networks have an evolutionary path. They're both the same, but they're on different legs of that path. And so initially, when you look at RTP, it was growing, getting banks on, and then eventually use cases were created, and eventually now they're seeing some pretty hefty volume. I think it also, when you look at it and say they started at $100,000 and now they're up to 10 million, so that's some indication of growth. When you look at FedNow, it's still 1 year. I think it's 1 year. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I think they hit their anniversary.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. Someone just reminded me it was November. Uh, so for I guess that was for RTP. Anyway, FedNow will be 2 years in July. Thank you. I like this interactiveness.
Time
I love
flies. It just feels like it was like last summer it was
I
introduced,
know.
but they were averaging like 100 financial institutions a year. And actually, so I guess what I'd like to know is, do you think it'll still be like 100 institutions a month? Sorry, not a year. Being added, or do you think they're going to be like a slow? My perspective is I think there's going to be a slowdown in the ramp up, because I felt like a lot of people were pulling away at the end of last year, and so maybe didn't budget for the first half. And then also, like, what are those use cases like when you're working with financial institutions? Like, what are the ones that they get really excited about?
Yeah, I think
Oh,
that when you look at the number of banks, right? And what I was going to say was that, that FedNow has a large number of banks, but not a large amount of banks sending. And so, but that's common, right? That's where RTP was 7 years ago. No surprise, right? So they're both on different evolutionary paths at the moment in terms of a timeline. That doesn't mean that one is better than the other, or one's, doesn't matter. What we're starting to see though on RTP is a lot of the transactions are from wallets and payroll, right? That's what brings you your heavy numbers. And so when I look at use cases, there are two types of use cases. There's a receive and a send use case. And so if you're a financial institution looking at RTP or FedNow, you have to realize that when the day you go live, and this is 99.9% of the time, and I've launched a lot of banks since TCH, is that you'll receive transactions in 5 minutes. In the first 5 minutes, you start to receive transactions. So there are applications, there are use cases out there that your members or your customers are using today. It just so happens that the money movement piece is via ACH. However, as soon as your institution, your banking institution goes live, the network is made aware of it. All the banks on the network are made aware of it, and they start converting you from ACH to, in this case, RTP. So I want to say a little bit about PayPal, right? So PayPal is a wallet, and what basically happens is, and what caused such great growth of that, is that PayPal started to use RTP for to send funds from your PayPal account to your bank DDA. But you only saw the offer if your bank has RTP, right? So it filters. And so if I'm in PayPal, I'm not going to see that offer if my bank doesn't offer RTP. Once the and PayPal started to charge for that out of the box, right? A lot of people were saying, well, is that going to work? Are people going to pay for RTP transactions? Answer is yes. So 70% of people who saw that offer actually used it. And so that's a pretty good adoption rate. So that answered the question for me is, from a monetization perspective, is someone willing to pay for an RTP transaction? For me, I've been in banking for years. What I would do is look at ACH, make it free. It probably is today anyway, and then make RTP your expedited option. But like FedEx, I always say this to folks, when you're taking a FedEx box in, you can send it 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, and pay a different fee. Same box, right? But different speed. And I think people and consumers, businesses are used to that kind of thinking when it comes to paying for speed. And so that's something that I think is expected. So Marcia, I wanted to make sure I answered all of your questions. I think right now, I think from a use case perspective, we're really looking at wallets, moving money from PayPal, and payroll. And I think expedited payroll is a perfect example. When you go to those receive use cases, that's one that if I'm employed by a certain employer and I bank at a certain bank, I can get expedited payroll. And so what I like banks to think about doing is, if you are receive only, start thinking about promoting that, but don't promote RTP and say, hey, we have RTP, because no one's going to know what that means, right? What they are going to say is, we are, so say we're expanding, we're offering new payment methods to enable you to receive expedited payroll, to enable you to move money from your wallets to the bank. That's not a bad way to state it, and it really does bring value to your institution and the stickiness to
Well,
customers.
and with that payroll, so I guess like a lot of financial institutions, since the rising cost of deposits, they're looking to attract maybe more small businesses than they had in the past. And so offering like an immediate payroll solution could be a way to attract those businesses to your financial institution instead of another one, because like they're also competing for employees, and to make their business attractive to their employees, if they can offer instant payroll, like that can help them maybe get better candidates. So by offering instant payroll to your businesses, you're helping them to be successful.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to like take a step back, because it's so important for financial institutions to understand like how, I mean, it's not easy to connect to the network, but it's not as hard as they think it is. And that's one of the things, like when I was working at FIS, it's like we were getting folks on the network in like 2 months, or 2 to 3 months. And it's not about the the technology is a hurdle, because I know everybody's dealing with legacy systems, and their core provider may or may not have a solution for instant payments. But the exciting thing is that even if your core provider doesn't have a solution right now, there are other paths to get connected to the network. And that's one of the reasons
Right.
why I wanted Mark to talk about this. And so, you know, it's more about having your strategy lined up. So, Mark, can you talk a little bit about like it just in simple terms, like how are companies like yours, Alacriti, helping banks get connected to the network, and like what does that process look like?
What are the steps? Yeah. Um, Firstly, I like to say that we all start with the core, your banking core, and the approach that we wanted to take was we wanted to take so banks typically, if they're using a certain core provider, the knee-jerk reaction is to go to your core provider and use them to connect to the RTP or the instant payment networks, right? The way we looked at it was a little different, and because obviously we're not a core provider, so what we do is we integrate your core, or we integrate into it. And so some of the questions that we would typically ask is, are you hosted or on-prem? Will your core allow a third-party connection? And maybe define a core implementation team within the bank to talk to, right? So that's our first step. So bottom line, if you're on an XYZ core, I won't mention any particular names, but if you're on a specific core, we can most likely integrate to that core and act on your behalf. So for instance, when you do the RTP transaction, you would send us the transaction. We would then go into the core, pull pull the funds out of the sender's DDA and place it into your GL account on behalf of you. Makes it very, very easy. There's some other items as well. So I wanted to talk about the use of a TPSP. You have a choice, right? You could go direct to the network, or you can go to a TPSP, which is what Alacriti is. And what we found is about 95% of FIs select a TPSP. And the reason is, in my mind, a partnership, right? There are a lot of steps to this process. And what most people prefer is to have a partner go along the way. So what I'm going to share with you, I collected some thoughts that were actually coming from our customers. Um, but I'll first start with the implementation steps that Marcia asked for. So basically, a typical implementation for us is about 8 to 10 weeks. That usually includes the implementation to the core. Okay. Um, we schedule a kickoff workshop. We have a timeline and a project plan, and we do this in conjunction with your team at the financial institution. We do an SOW and a BRD. We figure out network connectivity, core integration, identifying gaps and remediation of those gaps, because not every organization is the same. It's not a cookie cutter model. And so we find things sometimes that we have to work around, but we're very good at doing that. So we identify those gaps, and we come up with a remediation effort. We also do testing and network certification, and then ultimate launch. So those are the steps. Now, I asked a couple of our customers, give me some ideas. So what tips do you have for banks that are looking to add on instant payments? One is absolutely, they said, find a good partner, not a vendor. Find someone who's willing to work with you through the process. Okay. There's a lot of paperwork here as well, believe it or not. And sometimes the paperwork takes longer than the actual technology piece. But we work with you, make sure that that paperwork is done and done properly. Some questions that new customers to instant payments think about. Uh, One is, how does this fit into your overall business strategy? Make sure you have a business strategy around it. Don't just launch it and then say, all right, now what? Right? You have to really think about it, because you're spending time, you're spending funds, budget, you're spending resources. Have a plan on how you want to utilize it. If you're just going to be receive only first, fine. But also have a plan for later when you ultimately want to send. Um, some other items help prioritize current and future use cases. I always go, I've been in product development for a long time. And the first thing I always do is I go to my customer and I ask them, what can we do better? Where are there gaps in the consumer, or the customer experience? What do you want to be able to do? That's where I got my best ideas, right? And obviously more agreeable to the customers. But make sure you do that. Have an idea of what you want to do, what use cases you might think about building. And those are those send use cases I was referring to. These are the ones that you build, right? So other banks are building use cases that you can use for your customers immediately, but think about the things that you want to do. Do you want to? I know very small institutions are going out to um, title companies in the area and putting programs together that for real estate closings, they could very easily send the funds to the title company at closing. Auto dealers, that's a big area where a lot of people are starting to say, hey, let's form relationships within our market and bring new capabilities to our customers. Building an internal team, very important. And this is more like project development 101. Excuse me. And what I mean by that is have all your stakeholders at the table. I've seen so many situations where people forget to, this is a true story. I've worked at a bank where someone forgot to bring in the risk group for payment product. So you add them late, and then all of a sudden, it's a little harder to do the project. It takes a little longer. Have all the stakeholders at the table and work with your partner, your TPSP partner, so everything runs smoothly and everything's designed well. I'm just thinking of some other things. Understand the transaction flow and its effect with your internal processes, right? A lot of people say, I'm going to have to change my internal processes. That's going to cost me money and people. The fact of the matter is, on all the people that I've worked with who are integrating, none of them have added more people. So it's an opportunity to go into your operational area and make some changes to it for the better. But oftentimes it's a cost save effort.
Mm-hmm.
And so the instant payment offerings are so mechanized that it actually makes it very easy. So I'll pause there because I know I'm going through a very, very long list.
Well, and yeah, no, and I was going to respond to some of those things because I think, it's interesting, especially on your last comment, is I was talking to one bank, and one of the things that was really surprising, because everybody's thinking about, the fraud and the security and how do I make money. But there's like a huge like operational cost savings when you do this, because now you can start streamlining processes, a lot of things that were manual or error prone. You can start automating. You can even, you could, like a lot of banks, I mean, obviously banks by nature are risk averse, and that's one of the reasons I think we're seeing slow. Well, there's a couple of reasons why we're seeing slow send adoption, but some of the earliest use cases that a financial institution could implement are internal use cases, like moving money between departments, right?
Right.
And it'll be good in a minute if you have examples of some of those internal use cases that you've seen. So one of the things that I do, like when Mark was talking about bringing people to the table and making sure you have your business strategy, I mean, there's a lot of financial institutions on the network now, more than 1,000, and most of them are received. And part of that is you can't make money, or it's really hard to make money on the receive side of instant payments. There's more value for you as an organization on the send side, and that's when you're really bringing value to the customer. And one of the things that I do to help financial institutions is I start off with, I have this like instant payments in a box workshop that I do that kind of helps you bring all your key stakeholders together and educate them on what instant payments is and what the value it brings, and it gets them excited about what's the possibilities for their organization. I do a lot of hands-on activities for everybody to internalize and think about, what it can mean for them. And then we dive into a use case that's specific to your organization and saying, what if, you did this process with instant payments. What does that mean? And we look end to end, including like the fraud and risk concerns, like how would you protect it? And at the end of the day, you have a high level roadmap. And then that is a great starting point to then start thinking about, okay, if I want to accomplish all this, am I going to do it with receive? Do I do send? Maybe request for pay, adding value to businesses. And then once you start doing that, then that helps you understand, well, does my current core provider can I do it through my current core provider? If not, like when is my current core provider gonna enable these capabilities? And if they're not doing them in a reasonable time, according to what your appetite is or where you want to be, that's when you can start looking for third-party service providers like Alacriti. So there's kind of this sequence of events, but really, it all starts with you and what are your goals for your customers? Like the other things to think about is like, is it for you? Is it a revenue play? Like, are you looking to drive revenue? Are you just looking to stay competitive? Are you looking for this operational efficiency? So really, that's kind of the core. Like, what are your goals? Why are you even thinking about it? Like, what are you trying to do with it? And then it builds from there. And then also you mentioned voice of customer research. So that's another thing too, is, it's really, it's good to actually, you always hear nobody's asking for it. It's good to partner with someone who can help you do research of your customers and get that feedback. Because if you're not hearing people ask for it, it's maybe you guys aren't speaking the same language. And so a good research study can position things in terms that your customers can relate to without, putting the term faster payments around it. And so, if you guys are looking just to, go super low risk and just understand your customer base, that's also something I can help with. Mark, like internal use cases, do you have any examples that might be good to share about kind of internal examples?
Yeah, I think what most people do, especially when they start to send, is they'll do loan disbursements first. And the reason is that they already know the recipient. I mean, you've already scrutinized them for a loan, so probably pretty safe that they're not a fraudster. But so that's what a lot of people do first. So if you're doing, and look, when you think about it from a loan perspective, if you're generating loan applications online, um, usually, I mean, I think very pragmatically about it and say, well, if I'm borrowing money, I need the money, right? So, what a lot of banks will do first is when they're first sending, they'll do that. They'll disperse the loan very, very quickly. It's a great customer experience. You do it on a Saturday or Sunday, it doesn't matter. But that's what a lot of people do first. I know that a lot of institutions also start with friends and family, or they'll use employees to test to test their send. I did what I mentioned, the fraud piece, because I know Marcia mentioned it, and I don't want to not mention it. I think what I'm finding in some banks is that they have a fraud system for wire and ACH, but those needs are very different than instant payments. And so, with a wire and ACH, you have time to scrutinize the transaction. So the fraud systems are designed to get you feedback, and then you at the bank will determine whether it fits your criteria for sending the transaction or not, but you have time to do it. With instant payments, you have what? It's a 15-second round trip transaction, and the anticipation of the customer is that the whole process is fast. So generally, what FIs have to do is they have to find a different fraud company or same fraud company, just a different module to accommodate instant payments, because the idea is you want to be proactive in this process. You don't want to be reactive. And so if I have a fraud system that can identify that my customer or the sender is not really my customer, that's extremely important to be able to catch that in time and stop it. Also, if my customer is being taken advantage of from a fraudster perspective, I would like to know that and stop the transaction. So I think that financial institutions play a huge role in that proactiveness. I like a layered type system. which looks at transaction analysis. It looks at the individual, the sender, and the receiver. But also, I like device management. And I think if you layer in those three aspects, that's a pretty good solution.
Yeah, no, I think that those are, yeah, fraud's always a big topic. So device profiling, like Mark mentioned, is kind of your first layer of defense, and it's usually the most cost-efficient one too. Like the device profiling will tell you if this username is associated with this device, because often bad actors might have multiple names, but there's only one, typically one name associated with the device. And like, looking at time of day, is this a normal behavior pattern? Is this person the geographical area for that transaction? And, there's a lot of analysis that can happen, but usually work with a provider, a security provider that can help easily put those rules in place for you. So, looking at that device before you accept that payments, and then having for send, you're going to have rules around, what's acceptable. Like, even though the new limit for the clearinghouse is going to be 10 million, that doesn't mean your bank is going to let your customers send $10 million, right? So you're
Right.
going to have a cap based on what your risk appetite is, and based on the type of user that you're interacting with. So like a consumer might have a different transaction limit than a business might have. And even between different businesses, you might have different limits based on your comfortability with interacting with that. Instant payments are safer because it's a push transaction, but they're still, vulnerable to like account takeover. So, it is important to put those layers of defense in. So that was a really good call out. I'm going to do another poll for us. So what I want you guys to do is, again, it'll either be a pop or in your chat. So if you guys want to rank the benefits of adopting a payments hub and a modernization strategy, with one being the most important and four being the least important. So you get to slide these up and down with the little handles on the side. We talked a little bit about this at the beginning of the call about how with the payments hub, you kind of have this centralized view, which I think can be very exciting to a financial institution, but I'd love to get your perspective. Again, if you guys could look for that, that would be great. And I think one of the questions I had was just like on, not terminology per se, but, are there any misconceptions that when you're talking to financial institutions that, that they're thinking about things the wrong way?
Well, I think the first thing that I see is that everyone thinks that the integration is going to be tedious and time consuming and take a lot of resources. That's the first thing I hear, right? And to be honest with you, we walk through that process with you. Every FI that I know have worked on it after they're through. If you ask that same question, they would say, no, it was much easier than we thought, and it brought operational savings and cost reduction into play as well. So that's a misconception. I think another hurdle that we hear about often is the fraud piece. So you have to think about it. You have to look at your customer base. I actually, a really unique thing that we did with one of our customers was they wanted to make sure, they wanted to sort of do a cleansing on their portfolio before they launched instant payments to see if they could identify any mule accounts.
Mm.
And so we worked with the customer to do that, and it was amazing. It's amazing what you find, right? And so they literally just not without sending transactions, they did analyze their customer base and their portfolio and found some things that need to be addressed before they launched instant payments. Because look, if you're a bad actor in ACH, you're going to be a bad actor in RTP and FedNow and everything else. So they took it upon themselves to do that cleansing, and I was very impressed with the outcome. So that can help you from a perspective of looking at fraud. It's always a mental hurdle, right, in terms of moving forward. So that might be a good way to address it. In terms of others, we really don't hear a lot about the just the implementation and the fraud piece primarily.
So one of the things and you talked about this a bit, so I don't know if there's more details that you want to elaborate, but like the legacy infrastructure, like all the banks dealing with these mainframe systems, and what are how how does your platform help them overcome that? And also maybe talk a little bit about like the APIs, because I know one of the other things, like, okay, so just a sideline here for a minute, we'll come back, is you were talking about lending a little bit earlier about lending being a great internal use case.
Right.
And I know, like, I'm going to put the little push for like the open banking thing, because with Dodd-Frank, financial institutions are actually going to have to budget money for your Dodd-Frank implementation based on the size of your organization. And lending is actually a really great use case for using open banking data. So one of the things I'm starting to suggest to financial institutions is when they're thinking about their Dodd-Frank um, projects, is why don't you bundle them with instant payments? Because like, even though Dodd-Frank, and we had a webcast session about that last time, so you can go to my Instant Payments Decoded channel on YouTube to re-listen to that, and I'll be having more on Dodd-Frank coming up. But one of the things to think about with Dodd-Frank, it's about data, but data can enrich your payments journey. And so when we're talking about lending, like one of the hurdles is having enough data to underwrite your customers to approve them for a loan. So you can kind of marry this up for a best in class lending experience. You can use, and so this is the API connection. So I want you to talk a little bit about the API thing, but using API to kind of get that data to enrich your underwriting process, and then do your loan approval, and then disperse the funds via instant payments. And like, wouldn't that be an attractive product to attract new customers and to generate new revenue and to improve efficiency? So that kind of hits all the bullet points there. So Mark, if you could go back to the modernization story and talk about a little bit about the how this helps them with their legacy, and how do APIs come into play?
Yeah, we use APIs for just about everything. And so where there are situations where you have a legacy platform of any kind, we are able to connect into those, and very successfully. So what we're trying to say is, you don't have to go out and replace 5 legacy systems to do instant payments. In fact, it's not true at all. What we'll do is we'll utilize APIs to connect with those systems. One of the systems, and we're starting to talk a lot about RFP, and in RFP, you want to be able to integrate those payments into your AR system or accounts receivable. And so we'll use APIs to do that too. So just want to mention something in passing about RFP, because everyone's asking about it. I'd said in the past that I think it's going to take a couple of years for RFP to be mainstream. I think that what's going to happen this year with it, and there are already a pretty sizable amount of banks that are doing POCs on it. They're running about 60,000 transactions per day.
Mm.
And I'm just sharing some stats with you, because if everyone wonders where RFP is. I was interested in learning that 70% of the transactions that are sent out are actually paid back via RTP. 5% are rejected, and the other percentages are just abandoned, right? So no one pays the bill. But they are starting to be used. I'm a little more enthusiastic about RFP in 2025 than I was in 2024. And I think by 2026, that will be a banner year for growth in RFP.
I hear they have a really good user experience. Like what I've heard about it, I haven't seen it, but I've heard it. They have a really good user experience that that generates trust in the participants, because that's one of the fears that people have, is like, well, could this be fraud play? But It's designed
One of the
really
big
well.
challenges in it is what do you do? So it's great for the sender, right? Sender can create a user experience that's really fantastic. Where there's been the problem is that what is the experience going to be on the receive side? Where am I going to see that I have a request for payment? How am I going to react to it? How am I going to pay it? And so that's been in my mind that's been the holdup, right? It's not on the send side. Companies want to send invoices to you. Anytime they don't put in a bill in the mail, right? It saves them a fortune. But that's been really the holdup in my mind is on the receive side. Now that's being dealt with and in a much better way. And I think personally, I think 2026 is going to be a big year for RFP. They're still doing the POCs. You had mentioned bill or loans. So I wanted to mention to you that I do a lot of analysis on transactions for instant payments, and I'm urging people to use your data. I'm a data geek, and so I look at transactional data and I can see what's going on in the marketplace very easily. The thing is, so right now, if you look at Alacriti customers, the bulk of them, again, they're seeing wallet payments, they're seeing payroll, but some other areas that they're seeing activity, and that's in the area of micro loans. So this is people for living paycheck to paycheck, and they're going out and they're getting a lot of inbound transactions from micro loan providers. My feeling is, if I were a bank, and I have been a bank for many years, I would say, hey, why don't I start a micro lending product? You already see your customers are using it, why not provide it? And so that's something where analyzation of the transaction data can help you better serve your customer.
Oh yeah, I have an concept on that that I share. Like, because AI is such a big thing, and with AI, you can kind of predict your customers' behavior patterns, and you can probably know maybe a week in advance before they're going to run out of money. And
True.
they
You look at
banks can't
balances.
banks can't, like, I mean, they don't do as much with overdraft as they used to do back in the day, but like if you know your customer is running out of money, this could be like the diet. You could say, okay, hey guys, you're running out of money. And you have options. Like we can either, you can either take on a gig job or you can cut back on your spending, or hey, we can offer you a microloan. And then you can use AI to figure out like what's that optimal amount to offer them, so that you don't, get them into, a financial situation that they're going to have a hard time getting out of. So there's a way to balance it, but I think that it's a
Yeah.
very customer friendly way to offer those.
It's a huge opportunity, and it's a service to your customer to help them with cash flow.
Just looking at the responses, so it was kind of interesting. So what people found most exciting was the centralized view of the transactions, and then real-time payment processing and settlement was second. And then the ability to add new capabilities was third. And then transitioning away from legacy was kind of like at the bottom of the list. I think, there people aren't in a hurry to do that again because it seems to be a big hurdle. But I think, like, again, once you have access to your data in real time, like, which is kind of part of the process in order to transact with these payments in real time. Once you can see your data in real time, you now have the opportunity to do real-time fraud detection, real-time reconciliation, hyper personalization. Like, what do we know about this customer and what kinds of services can we offer based on the customer's profile? So there's a lot more interesting things we can do.
Yeah, the one thing I wanted to mention is that in regard to having the data and the reporting close at hand. I don't know if any one of you have ever been through this, but I have at banks where we're audited, and internal or external audits are not a fun day. So what having that centralized data close at hand enables you to provide, if someone's asking for a list of transaction types and it's very easy to get to them and find them, and you can query on the type of transaction you're looking for and produce a list. So it would help. And I thought about this when we were designing our data capability, because I think it's important to have everything in one place. And if I'm looking at transactions that were fraudulent and I have to produce a report for somebody and then speak to those, all the data is in front of me on my workstation. So makes it much more easier. And a lot of people don't think about it, but until, of course, the day you're asked for the data. So.
We've been doing a lot of talking, and we haven't gotten really a lot of questions. But I mean, we've had good engagement on the polls. Do you guys have any questions for us, or do you want to hear more
anything.
about use cases, or
yeah.
what? I mean, what's interesting to you guys? We've got a lot of knowledge between the two of us, and we're happy to tackle any of your burning questions. Can be totally off the cuff, anything instant payments. Oh, and as a side note, if you guys like to dabble in cool tech, I put like an instant payment chatbot on my website that kind of helps you understand like where you're at and what might be good steps. I just published it yesterday. So if anybody wants to go around and play with my chatbot and provide me feedback, that would be kind of cool. My website is like fintech-consultant.com, and it's like halfway through the page. So would just really love to get your feedback, and then I can kind of tune that based on whatever feedback you guys got. So
So
check
how
it
do
out.
people? They just raise their hand on the screen?
Oh, you see a hand raise? I don't see a hand raise.
No, I
Okay.
don't. I just want to make
Oh.
sure people understand if they want to
Yeah.
ask a question, how to do
They
it.
can go in the chat and they can do hand raise, and if you raise your hand, we're happy to put you on camera.
Looks like we got a
So
question.
if you want to come on camera, okay. So we have a question coming through by Kathy. Says, how do we get the education and awareness out to consumers and business to get them start driving a need at the FIs? So what I'm hearing is like if you can't get the internal buy-in, that it's more like how do you get the external push? At least that's what it sounds like. It's like, I mean, Kathy, I don't know if you want to clarify. Like,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah.
So getting, it's interesting. It's a great question, because what I find is there always seems to be one individual who's interested in instant payments and making the argument for it. And what we try and do is support that person any way we can, right? To get data together or whatnot. It's difficult sometimes to get buy-in from your organization. And the way I look at it is you have to look at the areas of value. What are you going to bring to your customer? You're not bringing them RTP or FedNow, you're bringing them use cases. You're bringing them an ease of banking. Start there. As a product person, I always looked at new products when I was trying to deliver something new and unique for my customer. Just going in and saying we should do RTP because everyone's doing it, it doesn't serve well for some people, right? I mean, let's face it, not everyone's going to say, oh, sure, I'm on board with it, let's do it. So I think you need to make an argument, but make an argument at the customer level and what the customers are going to want to do, because there is something called attrition, right? And I think you have to make that point. And that is that if I'm employed by a company and my bank doesn't enable me to get my paycheck 2 days earlier, that may be a reason for me to leave. And you don't want that. I've done studies on it when I worked at Chase. It costs 2 to 3 times to get a new customer than it does to keep an existing one. So good arguments, but use the use cases as an example, and that reducing attrition and growing, right? When someone wants to change banks, put that in front of them, that you have that you're thinking that you're thinking from an innovative perspective and looking towards the future. I think that's important. What we do with people is if there's a group within your organization that needs to be convinced, we usually schedule a meeting with them and walk through what we're doing and why we're doing it and answer any questions they have. That's the partner piece, right? I think it's important that everyone is educated in terms of what it is, what they can expect, and what they can anticipate in terms of a day-to-day. So
Yeah,
any
and
other
I just
questions? I
wanted
thought there
to,
was another question I saw pop
yeah,
up.
yeah, there's another question too. I just want to add to that. I mean, I think like getting the mass, like we don't have like the Fed now doing this national TV ad saying, "Hey guys, go talk to your bank." I mean, so that's where like voice of customer research can come in handy, where if you want to know what your customers are thinking, you could do like a survey to your customers, but you want to have it structured in a way that'll really give you actionable information. One of the things that I think you guys ought to know about like the threats in the marketplace, if you're not already thinking about it, is you have like PayPal and Venmo that are really actively campaigning for people's business. Like the millennials and the next generation of customers, they don't even think they need a bank account. Like if you ask them who they bank with, they'll be like, "Oh, Cash App or Venmo or whatever." So these providers are a threat, and one of the reasons why they like them is because they get instant access to their funds. And one of the things like PayPal's doing, and I saw a firm was doing this too, right, is you could put your direct deposit right to PayPal, and they're giving high interest rates on the funds. So there's a huge incentive for people to put their money there. And it used to be a hurdle where you have to move your money from PayPal to your bank account to use your money to pay your bills. But now with PayPal you can just put it in your mobile app, and so most of your expenses you don't even need to move your money back into your banking account. You can just transact in your app. So I would check to see, are you losing businesses? Are your transaction volumes going down? Take a look at the data like Mark mentioned and saying, are we seeing signals that we might be losing our customers to our competitors? And those competitors might not be banks, they might be other providers. So those
No,
are
that's a
kind
good
of,
example. There was one bank I worked at where product manager told me that our customers don't use PayPal. Well, that was an invitation for me to go to my database.
yeah.
And wow, were there a lot of people using PayPal? So look at your data.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's important.
Okay, so we have a question from Raj. I think he's talking. Oh, he was mentioning use cases. So I don't know, Raj, if you want to, we got like 4 minutes. Do you want to come on camera to, let's see. Do you want to come on camera to share your use case? I see. So you were talking about converting domestic wire transfer payments to real-time payments and B2B payments from vendors. So what about the banks who are not on the network? How does that work?
Yeah, that's where
So
I'd like to ask a question or two.
yeah,
So what you're saying is if I'm receiving an international payment and I want to route it to a bank, to another bank that has RTP, I want to better understand the ask.
yeah, and Raj,
Raj, if you're able to just come on for voice,
uh,
be happy to.
yeah, I think I just enabled your mic. So if you want to come off mute, um, maybe you can see if you can share or just put it in the chat. Oh,
Okay.
okay,
If we have your information, Raj, I can write to you after this and we can talk about it if you like.
yeah. Okay, and then Amata has detailed remittance with via REM one help with more adoption rate with real time. Like I'm not seeing a lot of use of the fields yet. I mean the additional data fields, but I think as more B2B use cases come up, I don't know, maybe Mark, are you seeing a lot of use of the additional data fields and payments?
I think we'll see a lot more of it with request for payment. I'm not seeing a lot of use of those fields yet. I think what people are doing, you mean for ISO 20022?
Uh, yeah, I mean that's what it looks like. The
Yeah,
question, Amada,
it's
yeah,
kind of,
okay.
yeah, all right. So it's an interesting thing. We've, I think this is going to be done in stages. I was just speaking with someone about this yesterday. Um, with the additional fields that are available in ISO 20022, I think banks have been terribly focused on just getting to be able to utilize it or to offer it to make the deadline, if that's what you're referring to. But I don't know any banks that are using it yet. Now that might take time, right? Because usually what banks will do, uh, when they have a deadline to utilize ISO 20022, they'll do everything they can to meet the requirement. But I think the business has to catch up. So
Can
I
I
haven't
just
seen a lot of usage of that data yet.
For long term, yeah. So I just launched the last poll. Like, if you guys want to just quick check on that. So, how do you envision instant payments impacting your institution? Not currently considering implementing it as standalone, using it as a catalyst for payment hub or cloud migration, or just not sure. So, I'd love to get your perspective. And just as a little plug, so my goal for this, I haven't yet developed a cadence, but I've got a whole lineup of speakers for the next year. So I'm just kind of working through my schedule right now. But I want to let you know that my next session is going to be on the 5th. And it's going to be on cross-border. So I've got 2 more sessions planned, one on the 5th and one on the February 5th, and then the next one's on February 12th. So the one on February 5th is going to be talking about cross-border, some of the trends and where instant payments fits in that. And then on the 12th, I've got Payments Elsa and Jacqueline on talking about AI and payments modernization and how this kind of all comes together. So I've got 2 exciting lineups. And so, would love to see you guys there. Make sure you keep an eye out for those. I'll eventually be putting them on my website so you can just kind of see the whole lineup for the year and then, put a placeholder on your calendar. So hope to be getting some consistency there. And
yeah,
did
I'd also
anybody?
like to say, yeah, I'd also like to thank everyone. And look, if you have a question that you think of later, you can reach out to obviously Marcia or myself. You can reach me on LinkedIn, and I'll be happy to answer your question.
Likewise. All right. So guys, look for these. I'll have a recording available up on YouTube at Instant Payments Maven. So if you want to go back and listen to the recording, Mark, thank you. This has been an amazing conversation. As always, just enjoyed talking to you. And folks, you can reach out to either of us if you have any questions or need any help. We're happy to have that conversation. All right. Have a good one.
Great. Have a good day.